So anybody who's watching this that wonders why there's no part one to this race car build, this is it. So years and years and years ago, I bought this engine at an auction for a couple $100. Nobody knew anything about it. I just knew by looking at it, it was very old. I tore it apart, went through it. Turns out it was built in 1912, and put it back together and got it running. Yeah. I have only a handful of pictures because this predates my YouTube channel by quite a bit. So yeah, that's the way it looked at first. So it's come a long way since then. Unfortunately, I didn't have it all on video. This, like I said, predates the video. Anybody who's seen my 49 Ford, this is the same story. This was built before YouTube. And yeah, there's a 49 Ford Cummins right there. But when I got it, it was a 49 Ford grain truck with a flathead V8. And then I put it on a Cummins chassis and then painted it. And then, yeah, building it one step at a time. This is back when I was crazy and still drove Dodges. Yeah. Learned a lot since then. So here we go. So in doing my research, I found that before 1910, everything had gigantic engines in them. Up to 28 liters. But after 1910, everything got smaller. So they're down to 3 liters, 6 liters for race cars. That's kind of where I based my race car stuff off of.
However, Grand Prix racing is to return the following year with new giant Fiats from Italy. French Peugeots with engines of only half their size and valuable experience from their voiturette racing. The British Sunbeams are much smaller still. There is drama again at Encore Bridge. The racing, however, is different. The smaller Peugeots are setting a new standard in road holding. While the 3-litre Sunbeams come in 3rd, 4th and 5th. Louis Wagner's Fiat is 2nd. But it and all the other giants have been decisively defeated.
So I'm working on the 1912, and you guys want to see what old looks like? This is what old actually looks like. Everybody thinks 1970s is old. No. Before 1920. So you've got asbestos cloth brakes. That's just asbestos cloth, like glued to a metal pad. And then you've got a shaft tapered with a key. And the bearings are all loose and shitty in there until you tighten the wheel on. Once the wheel's on, it actually holds the bearings in. It's a spectacularly shitty setup, but it was probably pretty great in 1915. So you guys are gonna love this. You're gonna love this. So I built the crank mechanism to hand crank it. It's engaged to the front of the engine, and now with the hand crank mechanism, I can hand crank it with it in gear to see which direction is which gear. And and guess what I found? The rear end's mounted upside down. So this rear end needs to be overslung of the springs, not underslung the springs, which means I have to essentially take the rear end and do that with it. Because right now I've got 3 reverse gears and only 1 forward gear, which means it's backwards. This is the kind of thing an amateur probably wouldn't, or a professional wouldn't miss, but I'm not a professional. So I think what I'm going to do is everything else lines up the same. The brake connections are in the middle of the axle. They'll line up the same. Everything lines up the same. It's not an issue. The issue is it lowers the suspension by about 4 inches, I measured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the springs off, and I'm going to put the springs in a press, and I'm going to bow the springs 2 inches on each end on either spring, and that'll give me the 4 inches to lift the car up 4 inches essentially, but it won't actually lift the car because once I flip the axle, it'll be the same exact height. It won't cost me anything to fix this. It's just painful and stupid. All right, so currently, because we have to flip the axle on the 1912, we have a issue where if I flip the axle, it'll be pretty much touching on this side. We need to lengthen this. So I use the method pioneered by old Peg, and on this one, I made a jig and I stretched it. So this one's about 5 inches taller in between. It's about an inch more than I need, maybe half an inch more than I need, but that's okay. It will settle out a little bit, the suspension. I'll show you how I did it. It's actually quite simple. The jig only takes a couple of minutes to make, and then it's really easy. So here we are. This is, by the way, a safety glasses scenario. Not that the safety glasses are going to stop this pin from shooting out and just going right through your head, but there's definitely not going to be tons and tons and tons on it. Anyway, so essentially, I just welded a couple of pins to a chunk of flat bar, and then I just used that cylindrical wrist pin. Really, you could use anything. With the wrist pin, makes it centered. It gives it a very centered profile and make sure it doesn't bend crooked. But yeah, you just press and press and press until you're happy, and then you move and you do the other spot the same. And I'm using this as an identifier. So as long as this other spring lines up right here on this side when I do it, then it puts the bend in the same place, and then the shackle holes line up, so everything will be nice and uniform. Yeah, I'll put 2 bends in this one, and then I'll measure the difference with a measuring tape. So I can tell just by looking at it that it's a little uneven, but we want 6 inches, and we have 5.5 there, and we have 5 1/4 there. So we want 6 inches, so we have to go a little more. You just go back and forth, you do a little bit and a little bit, and you measure and you measure. And if you go a little too far, you could probably use the press to push it back straight just a little bit. You wouldn't want to do it too much, or you will eventually damage the spring. I don't know how much spring steel can take, but old Pegger, I've seen him build lift kits this way, and the truck's still not stacked out, overloaded and beat on. So I got the springs back in, and as you can see, they look goofy, but beyond looking goofy, the height of the vehicle is good and everything still lines up just fine. So that's a success story, and now we move on to the next challenge. So here's the next challenge for you guys. You'll appreciate this. So when I put the seats in, the shifter's no longer shifted anymore because I deliberately made the seat just a little longer and didn't factor that in. So now the shifters have to be shorter. I already shortened them. They're still going to require some fine-tuning once I can drive it, but we're a ways away from that yet. Don't worry about the stripper pictures. Just ignore that. So on to the next battle. I got the shifter linkages all figured out. They're pretty straightforward. So that's pretty easy. All made of junk, of course. Pretty straightforward. Yeah. On to the next battle. The next battle is going to be starting and running again and tuning. That's my plan. That's my plan. All right, we're back from yesterday. I did some thinking last night, and I ended up taking the carb apart this morning and cleaning it out to see if that's what's the issue, because gas was running out the front, so the float wasn't working. So I ended up tweaking the float just a little bit so it holds a little tighter shut. This is all old parts, so there's not a lot you can do. You could rebuild the carb, but I'm not going to start digging into that. I added a choke line, so now we have a choke. Yep. So we can choke it, and this is the timing advance. So all the way up, it's not set up, it's not done yet, but all the way up is, all the way out is to start, and then you just push it in, and then you're at the normal timing advance. I've got a couple of small coolant leaks, like really small, like right here, it's a little damp. I'm not gonna worry about some of this stuff. I tightened all the caps that were leaking on the previous run, and then I had a lot of shaking, and I had to fix this. Well, what it was how you adjust the timing on this thing is all these different bolt holes. You rotate the shaft that drives the magneto into a different set of bolt holes until you're close to it. Well, I had it out. You can actually have it off center. That's why it was shaking, because it wasn't bolted straight across. It was bolted with one hole out. So it was elliptical, I believe the pattern. So yeah, this is advance. Oh, look, I wrote it there just because. So there's starting. That's timing advanced. We'll see if it runs better this time around with this engaged, because yesterday when I started it, I left it in retarded position the whole time. We're going to try and start this thing again and see if I can't dial out some more of the issues. It's probably just going to smoke the shop out again and give me a headache like it did yesterday. But that's the name of the game. Oh, I think it's flooded. Pretty sure it's flooded. You see, there's your problem. Yeah. I don't know why the float isn't holding, but it's not helping my my test run scenario. It's making it very difficult to start, actually. Well, it's not flooded anymore, that's for sure. So if I give it just a little bit of throttle and choke again, it should just start. Get in there. There we go. Let's try this again. Now the question is, will it start again? Oh, we got gas coming out the goddamn carburetor. Man, that carburetor's confusing me. It is just difficult. Difficult. It seems like the float is holding, but I don't know if this is just too small for this big a displacement. It shouldn't be. It's a generic carburetor. Let's see if it will, let's see if it'll start again. That'll be the challenge. running on 3 cylinders. I broke my my choke, or sorry, my timing light hanging on this broke off one of the connections. So it was running pretty good, except that it was arcing. So I got to fix that, but that's a pretty easy fix. But it seems to start good now that I have the carb figured out. And yet every time it shuts off, it still manages to dump some gas out the carb. I don't know why, because the float is holding. So, yeah, I might have to replace that carburetor. It might just be old and wore out. Like, clearly, it's leaking at the shaft. So, I might just have to get another carburetor. But, I mean, whatever, it is what it is. It seems to run pretty good. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to try and hand start it. I give this a very low success rate, or I'll get killed. I don't know how violent the kickback on this thing is going to be, but it's warmed up. There's never been a better time than now to test hand starting it. The timing is acceptable. It started not bad on 3 cylinders, so it might start even better on 4 cylinders. I just don't think I can crank it fast enough. Yeah, I just don't think. Oh yeah! Yeah! Eat that! So once the carburetor's set and this thing's warmed up, you can start it by hand. It is possible. This thing started by hand. We're going to do that one more time. See if I can't break my face off. I'm pretty impressed. It's still doing the gas thing. I don't know what's causing that. There's definitely oil getting all over the place. I've definitely got... I drained about 1 liter out of the crankcase, but it's still getting oil up in here. So it's passing the rings on the engine, which means the oil level is probably too high. Because it can't come from the valve train, because the oil would be coming out right here. There's nothing above here. So the oil's coming from the pistons, and this thing's such low compression that it actually wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, if it's just getting past all the piston rings. They were in good shape, but they weren't new. They're probably 70 or 80 years old. So, I mean... compression issues maybe, but it seems to run pretty good, and it actually starts. And it started by hand. That was the first time it's ever started by hand. That's the first time it's ever done anything by hand. It never even fired before. I must be making what we'll call forward progress. Yeah, normally I have a stand for my phone, but not today. Today's gonna be all the hard way. My bald head right in the video. All right. This is the kind of thing where people die. I'll take it. Victory. Victory. Now we just gotta build a hood, drain some oil, maybe replace a carburetor, fix all the leaks. These are all compression leaks because these things are all right into the cylinder. And yeah. Build a rad cap. The rad cap doesn't stay on. It just falls off every time. It doesn't latch properly. It's all wore out. Man, I'm happy. I was having a really bad day where this thing would not start. And once I got this carburetor stuff sorted out, now it runs and it starts by hand. Unbelievable. So I've been working on the interior, and I have to say it's coming along pretty good. So we've got a leather wrapped clutch. The clutch all works now. That took a long time to get figured out. It seems really tall, but I remind you that it's a leverage issue. So because the clutch is right here, I have no room for big long linkages or any kind of assistance, so the clutch pedal has to be long. It actually is reasonably comfortable when you're sitting in the car. So that's important. The throttle is sorted out. That's there. The brakes are sorted out, sort of. They're pulled back on the handle. I'm sure they won't work properly. I'll have to do some adjusting once I drive it. This is how you adjust the choke right here. And then you got your timing. This physically adjusts the magneto. I better get that on video here. So there's our choke, real complicated. And then there's our throttle, real complicated. I'm going to have to lengthen the spring because it doesn't snap back as far as it should. The spring's a little weak. I'll figure that out. Let's see, here's my timing. So all you do is retard it to start and then advance it once it's running. That's it. That's the whole process. And this thing does require oiling. It is, I don't know, it's roughly 100 years old, I would think, at least. And then I did fix this coupling, so now it's nice and smooth. The chain being a little loose is just a fact of life. Amazingly, this all holds coolant. I never would have guessed it would, but because all this is I built this bracket, and it's just a flat plate, and it mounts a 235 Chev water pump. And the reason I had I used it because I had it, a 270 Ford or Chev water pump is the engine that's in the blue car. So the water pump doesn't work on that one. So I had to order another water pump, and I had this one left over that I already paid for. So I might as well retrofit it. And it's easy to get 235 Chev water pumps. 270 water pumps are more expensive and harder to get. And then I put the old fan I built back on. The belt's a little tight, but it seems to be okay. Let's see. What's next? Yeah, I still haven't figured out the oil. The oil is going to be a challenge. There's some kind of a float setup, and it's just total garbage. It's all rotten. I can't figure out where the float level was supposed to be because it wasn't original. It was something someone had built. So the oil level in this thing is really a mystery to me. When I ran it, it was spraying oil out and everything everywhere. I'm like, okay, there's too much oil. So I took a little bit out, and I'm going to take a little bit out until it makes sense. Yeah. I could add some kind of a sight glass. I might end up doing some kind of a sight glass out of the oil pan, but I haven't done it yet. One day. So I've been working on the front end. Don't worry about the 27. I'll explain that. I built a guard for the hand crank. The hand crank is done. It works flawlessly. Everything else is coming along really nicely on this thing. The fuel lines are all run. The fuel system works completely on its own. There's no more mysteries about this. Everything is run about it, so it's good. I built a spare tire rack. That's all done. The spare tire rack mounts to the back. It's supposed to be kind of crappy like that because that's the way it would have been 100 years ago. Back up on that. So yeah, the car looks pretty plain and simple, but that's what a 1912 race car would have been. I did finish this, the rubber work on the metal, and then I got the goggles and the racing cap and the jacket and everything for when this thing's ready to be test driven. And luckily, I even found some information on this engine, which is very, very hard to come by. This is the engine, when they were trying to sell them back in 1912. Where is the 1912? There it is, for the season of 1912. Now, what I don't understand is why that looks more like the one I've got. But according to Model E, which is what I have, that's the one I've got. So it's kind of hard to tell. I recognize at least that this one in the pictures has the side saddle mounts that this thing has for engine mounts, because this is really hard to figure out. It's just, there's just no information on this stuff. And it is 12/29/1911. Yep. They made people work right up to New Year's Eve. Cruel bastards. So, this thing is effectively done now. I wanted to show you guys building the hood. We had to build, but I can't because it was Buddy that built it for me. He helped me, and we did it at his place, a lot of it. And he wouldn't have wanted me recording on his property. Pretty simple. The same guy that built this car. Well, I'm building the car, but I mean the guy that did all the body work and put the body on this chassis, I bought off him. The car is relatively finished. It hasn't been test driven yet, but it's ready to be test driven. There's too much snow outside. It's still too much winter. I'm not even going to attempt to drive this thing out there and get it through the disaster that is my yard. So it has to wait till spring. There's just no getting around it. But it is ready to rock. The only thing's not done is I have to size this to fit the rad cap. It doesn't fit currently. And the reason I haven't done it yet is because I'm waiting for an emblem to be made. That's going to be sweet when you see that thing. I'm getting a custom piece of aluminum made so I think it might be brass. It depends what they make it with. But with the Continental emblem from 1912. It's pretty sweet. That's it. Once that's done and this is mounted, this thing is until I run into a problem that I don't remember or can't figure out, it is 100% done at this point. Ready to drive. And if you're wondering why I did a terrible job with the numbers 27 and everything, from what I can research, that's the way they would have been. It would never have been some kind of professional paint job. Most of them looked like they were done by hand. The race cars were built by hand. So, yeah, we'll try it. See if I can't kill myself. It's only 42 horsepower, but according to the records from the time frame, people drove these things at like 80 miles an hour. Some guy maintained a 70-mile-an-hour track run like for hours. So that's terrifying doing it on a park bench.
A fight? That would mean rejecting the last part of me that's still a girl.
Do it, Lisa. You'll be greater than or equal to boys.
Even though you're only 8, your possibilities are infinite.
27!